Hi, I'm Sharif and welcome to Let's Talk, the show that brings you the most important conversations of the day. One of the themes that we've taken up in the show over the last couple of months is the question of education. To help me understand the varieties of strategies that are available globally around education, I have my guest tonight is Mr. Ali Raza. He's the Regional Director for Southeast Asia at Beaconhouse Group. Very happy to have you here with me, Ali. I know that you worked with the government of Pakistan, from where you hail, as advisor on an education reform program. This was under the administration of Nawaz Sharif, the former Prime Minister. Now, of course, you have Imran Khan as your Prime Minister. But we'll put Pakistani politics aside for the moment. One question that I think gets asked a lot is whether quality education is only for the rich. Today, it seems that the public sector rather, has failed many of its citizens in providing good quality education, and it's the private sector that's filled that gap, but only for the rich. Now, is that how you see it operating?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me over. I think it's really an honor to be here and to be talking about education. And then, of course, I'm somebody who's worked with the government, so in Pakistan I was the advisor to the Prime Minister on education reforms. So interestingly, we've kind of explored the different avenues in improving the quality of teaching and learning. I think even with the right intention of any political government, they still struggle with the resources, because when it comes to public education, it's a very wide spectrum. I mean, in Pakistan, the government is obligated to provide free and compulsory education. I mean, that's the law we have there, to provide free and compulsory education to every child between the age of 5 to 16. So, I mean, that's really the challenge the government faces.
So they're compelled by the law to provide it.
That's right. So
but does the law compel them to give a certain quality of education, or is that undefined?
Well, that's kind of undefined. So that is where most of these political governments would struggle, because the amount of GDP which is spent on education in developing countries is falls short of actually what the public sector would require to bring in all that quality of teaching and learning. So I think that's really a challenge which is faced. But coming back to your question, I think most of these governments, like I said, the intention is there. So all they have to do is to bring in certain reforms, whereas they can improve the quality of teaching and learning in the public sector, which would give a hard time to all these private schools which are operating. I think, I frankly speaking, I believe that the public and the private education systems need to work in tandem so that they can support each other. I mean, that's really, so the quality standards could be determined by what the private education system is doing, and those quality standards need to be applied to the public education system. So I think it can definitely work that way.
Okay, so we'll come back to the question of private-public partnership later on, but I want you to help us understand, just as a way of kind of thinking about Malaysia, but through the lens of Pakistan and its problems and the strategies that were employed to deal with those problems. Could you give us a sense of what was it that the government saw going wrong when you came in as advisor? What was wrong? What was the diagnosis? And what was your prescription?
Okay, so basically what we were trying to see was the fact that 40% of the overall population, or student population in Pakistan, end up going to the private sector. And then when I say the private sector, I mean private sector is a wide spectrum of private schools.
So it's 40%, that's huge.
Yeah, that's true. Because clearly one could see that people were not very eager to send their kids to the public education system. And of course, they had their set of challenges, like I said, the resources, plus there were issues with the quality of teaching and learning. In certain cases, we didn't have proper infrastructure in place. So basically this program, when we went into, so what we did was that instead of applying it across Pakistan, because the Prime Minister wanted to create a model for all the other federating units, we've got about 8 of these in Pakistan. So we came up with a model for Islamabad, which has a very interesting landscape, which has its rural population, which has its urban population, and there are still areas in Islamabad where access is still an issue. So what we tried to do was to come up with a program which would not only improve the access and provide conducive learning environment for the students, but basically mainly focus on the quality of teaching and learning. So these were the three areas where these were the three basic foundations which kind of helped us develop the entire program. And so, I mean, there were a lot of...
Before we get further into the program, can I ask you, when you came into this role as advisor to the government, what was your background? I understand you've done a master's in environmental sciences, and so how were you qualified to talk about or help a government think strategically about education reform?
Okay, so earlier I was involved with some projects of World Bank, where I was working as a consultant working with the private sector back in 2001 or 2. And then I started working for an organization which was a not-for-profit organization where we were working again with the public sector schools and developing public-private partnerships. This was an institution, this was an NGO by the name of Pakistan Center for Philanthropy, which was essentially channelizing the philanthropy or the giving of different corporate entities, of different individuals into the right social sectors or social environment. So that was essentially my background. Then back in 2006, I joined Beaconhouse school system, which is perhaps one of the largest school system in the world. We have about 300,000 students as we speak, and growing, having our presence in almost 7 countries in the world. So we kind of understand the dynamics of education. So I joined this Beaconhouse Group in 2006, and then in 2012, one of their sister concern is called The Educators, which is a low-fee private school, which is a franchise model. So I was made the country head for educators. So I think I am somebody who's worked with the public education system, with the private elite education system, and with the low-fee private school system. So I think all these years where I've spent in trying to improve the quality of teaching and learning, this was, I think, the culmination point was to improve the public education system with all the different interventions we've not only developed, but we've implemented successfully. So, I mean, this was an opportunity where I thought that this would be very applicable. And then, of course, I think I have
I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to take a short break, and we'll come back. And I really want you to help me understand what this low-fee private education system is. I'm not quite sure we have that in Malaysia. We'll take a short break. We'll take a short break and come back. Stay tuned to Let's Talk.